Huo Yuanjia, a 10-year-old boy, has a deep fascination with kung fu, despite being barred from training by his concerned father, Endi, who fears for his son's health due to his asthma. Huo, however, refuses to let his condition hold him back and sneaks into his father's classes to learn the basics of martial arts. His only friend, Jinsen, supports his passion by doing his calligraphy homework, allowing Huo to train instead. When Endi is challenged by the best martial artist in their town, Zhao, Huo is excited and confident that his father will win. But when Zhao resorts to dishonorable tactics to defeat Endi, Huo is heartbroken and vows to restore his family's reputation by becoming the best martial artist in Tianjin. With Jinsen's help, he steals his father's book on martial arts and trains tirelessly until he's ready to challenge Zhao once again. After defeating Zhao, Huo becomes a celebrated martial artist, but his success leads to pride, and he forgets his father's teachings, indulging in alcohol, parties, and ignoring his responsibilities, leading to financial ruin and neglecting his daughter. As the moon rose in the sky, Huo set off to meet his wealthy best friend Jinsen, who owned a famous restaurant. They drank until midnight and feasted on unlimited food, but Jinsen's assistant reminded Huo of his unpaid bills that had piled up for over a year. Jinsen tried to reason with him about his spending habits, but Huo was convinced that Jinsen was just being stingy. The next day, Huo encountered his biggest rival, Qin, the only man he had not fought yet. In a fit of anger, Huo beat up his disciples after a slight altercation with Qin, but later that night, one of his followers was brought to him in a stretcher after being beaten up by Qin. Filled with rage, Huo crashed Qin's birthday celebration at Jinsen's restaurant and challenged him to a fight. Despite Qin's pleas for him to put their rivalry aside, Huo was relentless. Their intense battle ended in tragedy when Huo landed a life-threatening punch on Qin's chest, causing him to die instantly. The next morning, Huo returned home to find his mother's lifeless body on her bed. He mourned her death before discovering his daughter covered in blood, holding a pouch she promised to give him upon his return. Devastated by the deaths he caused, Huo stepped outside to be informed by his disciples that Qin had not beaten up his follower out of spite, but for his wife's honor. Huo's heart was heavy with guilt, regret, and sorrow, so much so that he saw no reason to continue living. He boarded the first ship that he could find and curled up in a corner, ready to let the currents of fate take him wherever they willed. After living in the unforgiving streets for half a year, Huo had had enough. He found himself on the brink of committing an unthinkable act, but just in the nick of time, a group of people by the river saved him. Though they welcomed him with open arms and took great care of him, even nursing him back to health, Huo fell into a deep depression, refusing to speak to anyone. But a blind woman named Moon saw through his despair and took it upon herself to care for him. Her grandmother, experienced in the ways of life, was sure that time would heal Huo's wounds. Finally, one day, Moon took matters into her own hands, cutting Huo's hair and coaxing him to walk with her to the river. There, with her gentle touch and encouragement, Huo finally emerged from his shell and became an integral part of the tribe. He cooked, farmed, and did household work, finding meaning and purpose in his new life. Over time, Huo and Moon began to fall in love, their feelings growing stronger with each passing day. But their happiness was short-lived when one of the tribe's children was caught stealing a cow from a neighboring community. In accordance with tradition, the child's punishment was to be beaten until the incense burned out, but Huo bravely stepped forward and offered to take the beating himself. The punishment for adults, however, was different, and Huo found himself facing off against the rival leader in a fight for the tribe's honor. Though Huo had the power to finish his opponent easily, he refused to use violence, instead choosing to dodge the leader's attacks until the incense burned out. Huo emerged victorious, earning the respect and admiration of his peers. But even in victory, Huo knew the dangers of power and refused to teach kung fu to the children, fearing it would change the peaceful nature of their village. Despite the adults' attempts to ignore it, the children noticed the deep connection between Huo and Moon, and when Moon visited her parents' graves, it brought to the surface Huo's own painful past, including the daughter he had abandoned after her death. After recovering from his mental condition, Huo decides to visit his hometown and family's graves, which Moon encourages. However, when he reaches Tianjin, he finds that it is partially colonized by foreign nations, making it almost unrecognizable from his childhood memories. His family's house is now old and shabby, and he apologizes to his father and Kui's family for his past actions. Huo discovers a wrestler named Hercules O'Brien is challenging Chinese people to fight and wishes to challenge him to preserve Chinese heritage. Jinsen, whom he previously had wronged, gives him the money he needs for the challenge. Huo wins the fight, gains fame, and is called to Shanghai, where he meets Jinsen and forms the Qinwu Athletic Association to teach Kung Fu to Chinese students. However, officials from the foreign chamber fear that Huo's popularity may trigger anti-foreign sentiments among the Chinese people, and they propose a match between him and 4 foreign champions consecutively in a single day. Despite the unfair challenge, Huo agrees to take part. He befriends his Japanese rival, Tanaka, who apologizes for the unfair match. Huo manages to defeat all 4 fighters, but during the final match with Tanaka, he drinks poison tea from Mr. Mita and collapses. Despite being seconds away from death, Huo manages to deliver a final blow to Tanaka, but he holds back the punch this time, unlike the one that killed Qin. Tanaka declares him the winner, and Huo dies in his friend's arms. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel for more videos like this.